Welcome back to Mortgage People. I'm Sean Humphries. This is my friend Vaughan Zawadzki. And next week, the Bank of Canada is meeting to decide the mortgage rates. 3 days after that, we've got our next new tariff deadline, which is February the 1st. So we're going to talk about that and how that relates back to your mortgages and the Toronto real estate market. I'm Sean. This is Vaughan, and we are Mortgage People. Well, the Bank of Canada meeting next week. This feels like this has been a long time since the last one. I know it's probably been the exact same amount of time, but a lot has happened in the last little while.
Certainly.
And it feels like we've been waiting a while for this next Bank of Canada meeting.
Yeah, I think it will most likely be a little lackluster. I don't think anybody's expecting fireworks. Too much going on. I think that they really have to sort of temper their activity a little bit. What's your sort of overall?
Well, the bank is, by economists, there's about an 80% chance of a quarter point rate cut on January 29th. And it's kind of expected when you get up over 65%, it's kind of expected at that point. We're at 80% now. So it'd be shocking for it not to happen.
65% of the time, it works all the time.
And then, in comparison, the Federal Reserve in the U.S., their meeting is on January 29th, and there's a 1% chance for a 25 basis point rate cut and a 99% chance.
No change.
But you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah, I don't expect much there. And it seems like at least the news is saying that the Bank of Canada will not be so concerned with that spread between the Canadian interest rate and the US Fed interest rate, that they're just going to do what they feel like they have to do. So
we're going to do what we got to do, right?
Yeah, I think so. And other than Scotiabank, as I was reading, I remember last week we looked at that chart, and Scotiabank is saying no interest rate cuts at all, and they're doubling down on that. Their recent comment was that they don't think that the Bank of Canada should cut at all, so they're sticking to their guns. I appreciate that. I'm sticking to mine. If we get we need five 25 basis point interest rate cuts in order to get down to my prediction. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean,
Scotiabank.
To me, both of those scenarios seem somewhat unlikely, that we'll have 5 and that we'll only have 1 this year. So I think that certainly 1 next week seems like it's going to happen. Not a foregone conclusion, but enough in the market where you would think that is probably going to happen. Do we get 5 more? I mean, anything is possible when it comes to what's happening in the US and what's happening with our inflation. Inflation this month dropped to 1.8%, which kind of is the fuel that the Bank of Canada needs to
there's a lot to unpack with that number. And I feel like as we continue into the future, and now other economists or journalists are starting to pick up on this, is asking the question, the way that we calculate inflation, is it still the best way to calculate it? Are we measuring this properly? There are factors. Canada factors in mortgage interest rate appreciation into their inflation numbers. The US doesn't. The rest of the world pretty much doesn't. I think it's only New Zealand that also does. And then we had the GST or HST holiday, or we're still in it, which is a big contributing factor into this lower inflation, or at least that's what the experts are saying. I have a quote here. Let's see if I can get this right. Stats Canada said on Tuesday that lower restaurant and liquor prices as a result of the temporary pause on taxes introduced in mid-December had contributed most strongly to the overall slowdown. Without that measure, inflation would have jumped to 2.3%. That's kind of a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, over the holidays, people need to spend less money, or they're probably spending money and they want to maybe have their dollar go a little further. So the GST holiday um, seems like it was a short-term success anyway, to maybe save some money. But is that a long-term success? Is that something that you think that's something that future governments will consider in the future when inflation needs a little bit of a boost during the holidays?
That's certainly where I'm thinking in terms of why is this relevant to talk about right now is, the Bank of Canada has had one tool, one lever essentially to pull when there's inflation, and that's jack up the interest rates. But now we seem to have another tool. Not that it's at the Bank of Canada's disposal, or at least not right now, because it came from federal legislation. The tax holiday, could that be used in the future as an alternative to jacking up rates? It's just lower the cost of purchasing. I don't know. I seem to like doubt it because of
Right.
what it will do to the deficit and the revenues that are generated for
Right.
the government. I can't see them wanting to say, "Oh no, we're going to take less of your money." When has that ever happened?
But why? So then the flip side is would they increase the taxes when they're wanting to change the economy in another way, right? They want people to spend less, and inflation is going up. Do you, instead of increasing the interest rates, do you increase the amount that people are spending on tax? Though I'm
Certainly
being a little
could.
bit facetious, but like I can't see that being well for this holiday. For next Christmas, we're going to increase the the taxes,
You know,
and so you guys can spend less.
I
Sounds
was
like political suicide.
I mean, it certainly does. It wouldn't be uh, favored by any Canadians, but when the Bank of Canada does it, we sort of idly sit by. Not everybody, but we sort of like, because it's not a politician making those decisions. Maybe we're more tolerant of the Bank of Canada raising interest rates. Uh,
Yeah.
I was watching the old Disney movie, 1973 Robin Hood movie, and one
Why?
of the
Why are you
over the
watching this
weekend,
movie?
over the weekend,
You
and
have nothing else to do but watch a 1973 Robin Hood movie?
apparently, I mean, it's hard for me to argue that I have better things to do when that's how I spent,
Yeah.
an hour and a half of my weekend. But one of the or what I perceived as one of the undertones of the movie is the evil government, or the king, who's the government, taxing
Yeah.
people to death. And I don't know what the political climate in the U.S. was like when Walt Disney made this movie, but I just thought it was relevant after us, being in this high inflation, and looking at the government taxing us to death. I thought it was funny, and I
Well,
don't
we
know if it
didn't
was intentional.
ideologically, I mean, so interest rates, they've given money back to the poor, I guess, with this interest rate or this GST holiday, right? So they're being Robin Hood and giving it back. I don't know if that's the necessarily the ideal that they want to do, but it seems like we're headed into. I don't want to. I don't know how much I want to get into this. We didn't plan this, so if this might come off the cuff a little bit. But it seems like the rich are getting richer right now, and certainly in the U.S., the richest administration in history, the who's who of billionaires are lined up at the front row at Trump's inauguration. The things that they're cutting benefit, or the policies that they're enacting benefit big business, benefit these billionaires. And it feels like, to me, if I look forward to the next 3-4 years, that we will get that upswelling of, hey, like these guys are rich enough, let's take some of that money and invest back into people.
I think
And
if he executes his plan to make energy less expensive, that's part of the game plan. That benefits everybody. So,
sure.
and I think that when you tax heavily, specifically on energy, the very wealthy will find a way through it, or at very least they can afford it. The middle class will get squeezed, but the lower class, they just won't get energy. So when you
Right.
overtax, right? So
Yeah.
if he executes on that, I think that will be helpful to everybody. I don't know. We're gonna
I just
see.
see I just see the pendulum swinging over from like the rich get richer to an upswelling of driven by the people, and let's do that. And I think that comes through in the underlying message that things are too expensive. Inflation is too high. And now we're seeing inflation, at least here in Canada, we're seeing inflation come down, interest rates come down, things are not rising as fast. And in fact, if you take out mortgage interest inflation, that number of 1.8% is down to 0.7% year over
Yeah,
year is inflation cost. So if you think about that, like things are getting less expensive,
which is
or
recessionary, an indicator of recession, right?
yeah, I mean, if we're not spending as much money and things are getting going down, and we're heading towards a recession, we're going to talk about this, maybe tariffs. The Bank of Canada will have no choice but to reduce interest rates, and that's where I see a quarter point, 1/4 point interest rate cut for the rest of the year as being unlikely, and I also see like 5 being unlikely on the other side of that. Like, I just don't think we have a big enough recession in order to justify 5 more interest rate cuts this
Which
year.
brings me back to that conversation about are we the metrics that we use to calculate inflation, are they still relevant? Are they still accurate? It's essentially the same equation that we've used prior to the mass globalization that we've experienced. Maybe time to look at it again. It
Right.
gets blurry.
Well, we're using this is, the 1.8% is headline inflation. This is the one that makes all the headlines, but there are several, I think there's about 30 different metrics that they look at when making their decisions. So, Canada announces this is how much things are costing for everybody. I think it's fair to say that how much people spend on shelter is a reflection of how much things cost to people. But if you're just going to make your decisions on does the Bank of Canada make a, one-to-one comparison of this is what our policy rate is and this is what inflation is, and not look at any of the other 29 different metrics? Probably not. They're looking at all the different things and then making a decision from there.
So you're saying that it's already built in is the flexibility, and I agree with that, and because the employment or the labor market is one of the factors, a major factor. There was something else I was going to
Yeah, the
mention.
employment numbers uh, was a big factor. Employment didn't look as good, and they dropped the policy rate. And if our employment numbers continue to look poor, I see that as being as much of further, that and inflation as being further
That's a catalyst
hot
for
for them.
another for a rate cut or more rate cuts or up to 5 rate cuts, or however you want to look at it. Um,
Yeah,
but I mean, we're
exactly.
going to cheer on the labor market, and we're going to hope that whoever our new administration is can help out with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll find we'll have probably 2 new prime ministers in 2025. That's the I guess the
Yeah,
over under is 1.5. Are you the over or the under?
I'm betting the over on that one.
Okay. So the February 1st is the new deadline for when tariffs could be introduced. We spent the whole day, the whole inauguration day, Canada's name was kept out of his mouth. I wanted to say
Smack.
keep your name out of my mouth, out of your
Keep
mouth.
my country's name. Oh,
So that happened, right? But then he doubled down later. I think it was in the evening, or I don't think it was the next day, but like at the end of the day, said, "Oh, well, maybe February 1st." This is after he had said that we're going to study the trade relationships. And I assume that doesn't happen in less than 2 weeks. Like we're, 10 days away from February 1st at this point. Like, that's a lot of studying to happen in order to do that. It felt a little bit off the cuff, and it felt like, I'm going to get you next time. It felt like a bully threatening after he's maybe thought it through a little bit, wants to fight the little
his
guy,
advisors. We have more information now. I don't know if you saw the email or newsletter from Dr. Sherry Cooper, our chief economist here at Dominion Lending Centers, and other newspaper articles as well, talking about a memo that must have been released to journalists. With Trump's top advisors saying this is not going to work as a blanket 25% tariff, specifically citing the energy that Canada produces and sends down there, that they purchase, and also with our automobile manufacturing, essentially saying Americans won't be able to afford cars if we slap this tariff on Canada and Mexico, and they won't be able to afford energy if we do that. U.S. is our biggest purchaser of oil and gas from Canada. So the speculation is those two would have to be exempt, and then the rest of it kind of gets blurry. Seemed like, was it Rob McClister? Do I have his name right? Saying that putting a 25% tariff on Canada is like buying a $20 coupon for a $10 savings. It's like, so I think that when you're saying that, that it was maybe like, I'll get you next time, sort of throw it in at the end. That sounds pretty accurate to me. That I think he's rolling back on that, but trying to still sound like a tough guy.
That's how, and I think that's how the markets react. We certainly didn't get our bond yields, which our interest rates are based on, those came down quite significantly. Like we had this big bump as we were heading into the presidency, and then they've come back down to earth a little bit, and they didn't go right back up. People are not buying this. It felt like an empty threat to me. And I mean, if he wants to go, let's go. And I think we're up for the fight. And I think we don't have to hit hard. It's like, you want to mess with the hornet's nest. Sure. They're tiny little bees, right? But we're,
but 100 of them
stick in there.
Feel though good. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're going to hit you specifically. Sounds like the retaliatory tariffs would be on swing states, would be on Republican strongholds. So hitting kind of those states the hardest. Yeah. And so that's the whole idea, is that yes, we don't have the massive economy, but you want to mess with us, then we'll mess with you back. I think we're more than willing. We're not just going to roll over. This is not a possum type of situation. This is, you want to mess with a moose, let's use a Canadian reference. You're going to get stuck with the antlers. You want to leave us alone? We'll all be fine. I don't believe him. I think that he's saying a whole bunch of stuff to get a reaction. He's throwing it out there to see what's popular. Would tariffs on Canada be popular? Absolutely not. And that's just why it won't happen. He'll find a reason not to do it.
Sure. And he won't get support. This is sort of him standing on his own saying this. He's not going to get a ton of support from America to I'm going to jack up the cost of living for you by doing this tariff. I think he, maybe has his facts really not straight here at all. So
he makes up numbers like we do on our podcast.
Oh my goodness, do we ever? We just don't threaten.
No, I mean, he threw out a 200 billions. He's subsidizing us 200 billion. That's just not the case.
No,
And so, well, what does this mean for our mortgage rates? What does this mean if the tariffs come in place? We could expect our bond yields, which our fixed rates are based on, they would probably go up, at least momentarily. And so fixed rates would cost more money. What would happen with the Bank of Canada's policy rate? I think it does the opposite. I think we see them having to pull back on the policy rate. Let's support Canadians by making it less expensive to borrow money.
The employment numbers would be projected to take a hit if the U.S. is not purchasing from us at the way that they typically do. That could lead to layoffs and other problems, or at least hiring freezes. So that would not be great. Sure, we get lower interest rates, but we want a strong labor market above all.
Yeah, I think if we have, yeah, so if we're affected by that, as we were saying earlier, the benchmark policy rate is affected by inflation and the job market. The fixed rates, the bond yields, um, that's more of a global metric. How is Canada doing on the worldwide stage? Are people investing in Canada?
Correct.
Is it more expensive to that? Is it safe to invest in Canadian? So if there's tariffs, um, Canada becomes a less attractive economy to invest in.
Yeah.
And our cost, the do people want to invest here? No. Boom, boom, boom. Higher
Cheaper
fixed mortgage rates.
purchase price of the bond yield and higher.
Yeah,
Or sorry, cheaper purchase of the bond, higher yield. More
yeah,
investment in Canada, lower the bond yield. So let's get that going.
yeah.
Can we find another trade partner to replace the US? Like, not likely. So we're gonna have to make this work.
Not in 2025 or 20, can we, there'd be no way the world would have to change dramatically for our oil not to be the most valuable thing that we export to Canada, to the US and the rest of the world. And yes, we can build pipelines to other places in the world, but that's a decade in the future. We'll
Yeah.
have many different prime ministers and presidents by then.
So Feb 1st, what do you think that there'll be a move on Feb 1st? Do you think there'll be an announcement of any tariff? Because this was also, and when Trump announced the tariffs, it was contingent upon border security and fentanyl and illegal immigration,
He's doubling down on that too. That's the reason.
which is
It's
like,
not about trade.
right, which is it's essentially like immeasurable in a way. I don't know how you measure illegal immigration and illegal fentanyl. How do you measure illegal stuff with any sort of real accuracy?
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. So
He says all this stuff for a reaction, right? So he's got it. We're talking about this on a small podcast in Canada about mortgages. We're talking about Trump for 50% of it or more. And so he's getting everything he wants from that. But he says things like this, like he says things for a reaction. He many times has said, we're having our health plan rolled out in the next few weeks. That he said in his first administration, it never happened. He said it a variety. Here's our plan. It's coming. He says many things, but for them to launch tariffs February 1st, so much work has to be done on their side in order to make it happen. I just don't think it's a big enough priority. It's a big enough popular thing for him to do in his first 100 days. Maybe I'm wrong. I just don't see it. If it happens, it doesn't happen February 1st, and it doesn't last long because we're going to make it very painful.
now I'm going to change gears here for a second, because you mentioned our small podcast, and I agree, small right now. But eventually, I anticipate that we get picked up by a major, TV, like a major broadcast, legacy media, so,
For sure.
and
CBC.
when that happens, I think that our show should include a musical guest every week.
Okay.
I
Who are
have
you
an
saying?
idea of who I would put as my first musical guest, but I want to just put you on the spot right now.
Okay.
Week 1, when this launches nationwide, coast to coast, who should be
Who
the,
opens for us? So,
maybe not
I
opens, but maybe like like in a regular talk show, at the end of the talk show, they'll have
yeah.
a musical guest. I like that format.
So a band came to my head. I have obviously I've not thought about this whatsoever, but I think who I would put on first would be, would you please welcome Sloan?
Whoo, Halifax, Nova Scotia, and
Yeah.
I haven't thought, that's a great pick, and I hadn't really thought about this either. So I'm not really fully prepared with an answer, but I was thinking nobody jams like the Foo Fighters.
Wow. They would do it.
Yeah, not really Canadian, not really mortgage related, but like, what a kick-ass
Yeah.
band.
I mean, Foo Fighters is a great pick. I went Canadian. Right away.
I love
I
it.
thought um was
You
it
could get
Chaos?
it's the Bare Naked Ladies. They could
Bare
do a
Naked
little
Ladies.
$1 million song that's
Yeah.
sort of relevant. That would be too cheesy.
No.
We're not gonna
No.
edit out this terrible segment either, so I hope you enjoy
If
it.
you're still listening, then congratulations. So I don't know if you saw, well, you saw it because you brought it up,
I
but
did.
TD has been smacked with $3 billion in fines. What happened there? I didn't see this. You were telling me about it.
Yeah, this is from so they entered the US market. I don't know the date that they entered the US market. For specifically, and this is mortgages, and this is based on AML. So, the big blue bank here in Canada got slapped with a little fine for not following compliance to do with anti-money laundering. And TD in the US got smacked with a much bigger fine, 3 billion in fines. With what is it, 9 billion? Let me pull this up. 3 billion in fines and asset caps. As a result, they're selling off 9 billion worth of mortgage assets. And I think that
In the US?
in the US, yeah.
Okay.
And it got me thinking about Canadian banks. So in the US, their banks aren't really like centralized so much as ours are here. There's a lot of independent, a lot of credit unions. So I think the Canadian banks are specifically uh, tailored to have success in the United States based on our model of
Mhm.
a lot of branches and big banks. So I think that TD figured that out long before I figured it out and went down and had a big splash. But I guess they had issues with the anti money laundering compliance, specifically around drug cartels and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
they're
drug cartels, right? Like,
Oh, it's scary stuff. There's a
yeah.
Netflix documentary on drug cartels, and I think specifically around HSBC
Mm.
and money laundering there, and like literally threatening people with pictures of their children, and like that was their signature to get the mortgage approved. So that's scary stuff. I don't know if this is as scary as that. I think we'll find out more. But what the relevance to the Canadian market is, and we know this already. Sean and I have done all kinds of anti-money laundering compliance courses already. I think it's going to be stricter. I think there's going to be more regulation around it. I think that when you apply for a mortgage, be prepared to have a rectal scan and
A retinal
and
scan. A retina scan.
retina scan, and be prepared to show your elementary school records and take a blood test. Getting a mortgage is going to be harder in terms of verifying who you are in the future. So that's
Well, I think if somebody were to go back 20 years and just fast forward into the future of what kind of regulations and documents are necessary now to get a mortgage, there's a ton of work to do. Even for like, some of our alternative lenders who maybe don't need as much documents, there's still a ton of stuff. I feel bad sometimes having to go back and ask for more
sure.
stuff. But even just like the verification of who somebody is, we could kind of get by with, oh, the lawyer's going to do that. Now we have to do a politically exposed person form. We have to do a know your client form. We have to indicate how we verified who it is, and if they don't pass those thresholds, then they're doing a facial scan and trying to figure out, okay, is this the right person? Can we verify that using the face and the ID? So, but it does seem that we get like, isn't there more and more fines for this sort of stuff? Like, I feel like this is the third time I've heard of like TD being fined. So I think when I saw the headline, I'm like, oh yeah, that already happened. But you're saying
No.
this is another
Yeah,
big fine.
that's true. There have been some shenanigans, or at least like a crackdown. When we say non-compliant for anti-money laundering activities, there's a set of rules that they have to follow. It doesn't mean that something crooked went down. It just means that they weren't doing their compliance to the level that they need to, right? So
Yeah.
it I don't know the details on this one, but certainly I think with RBC in Canada, it was a much smaller fine, and it could just be a warning to say, hey, you really have to do this. You really have to get these documents signed. You really have to provide more proof of identification. Not that money laundering happened, but the compliance didn't happen. So it's
Yeah.
good to point that out to say I'm not worried about the fundamentals of our banking and mortgage systems, but it's going to be more strict going forward. So consumers should be prepared for that. It's no longer, 40 years ago, you walk into the bank and they know you and they give you the loan. It's going to be a lot more paperwork than that.
And well, why would that benefit, or why is this good for Canadians if there's going to be more compliance? Why is that good and why is that bad? I have an answer to it.
I
I'll
don't
throw it
like
out
it
to
at
you.
all. I like the old version of it, but now that we don't walk into banks and stuff, and our immigration has, really expanded, and not that the immigration is the problem, but when you have bigger population, bigger cities, there's more autonomy in there. There's a little less
Mhm.
familiarity with people, so you're not walking into your bank branch really for anything. So there's there's a lot that can sort of pass off that couldn't before.
I'm gonna jump on my soapbox a little bit here. Not that we're on a soapbox, but this is so if there is fraud, that costs all Canadians money. In the way of people borrowing money that they should be able to borrow, or not being who they say they're going to be. That expands the real estate, that increases prices in the real estate market, because all of a sudden there's more people that are able to purchase those homes, and then more people purchasing means that the prices go up. If we have more stringent laws on people, on what they can borrow, who they are, what their income actually is, that levels the playing field for all Canadians, and it makes it less expensive to purchase. If there's this, then less fraud, there's less cost of that theoretically would increase the margins of what a bank could make on a mortgage, and would then lower the amount, could lower your rate. Jumping a little bit there, but I still
Yeah,
think that fraud is bad. It just costs people too
for
much
sure.
money overall.
For sure it does. And I haven't heard about it so much in the Toronto market as I did pre-pandemic of, international buyers coming in on offer night and throwing down cash. Not that it's literal cash, but they're closing without mortgages. So that's a potential, and then we can't do anything about that. And maybe that's where the focus really should be is cash purchases for real estate. I don't want to say that everybody has to have a mortgage, but what hoops do you have to jump through if you're paying for a property outright?
Yeah.
So
If
maybe
I mean,
the
if you're
the
transferring it in cash, I mean, but that's we have a foreign buyers ban that's been expanded. It's been extended to January 1st, 2027. So we're not allowing those kind
but
of
there were
foreign
so many
buyers to come in.
loopholes in that I feel another recent headline is something like 50,000 international students didn't show up for class. Now that this is being looked at, because I think that the university tuitions and stuff and our attracting international students was a vehicle for some of this international purchasing of Canadian property, because they were exempt. If you were in school for 2 years, but nobody was tracking attendance. So if you're registered for school for 2 years, you could purchase a property in Canada. That money, with our gifted down payment structure, 400K comes from overseas. It's
Right.
all checked and cleared out. Everybody did the right thing. It's just the policy was the way that it was. So
So saying that was, I don't know how, I don't think that that was because we had like taxes on like what was the acronym again? Non-speculator, the speculation tax or whatever.
right.
and I think it was 15%. It went up to 25%. I don't remember the exact numbers,
I've
but it was
never done a
expensive for people to
mortgage
come in.
where the client had to
No.
pay that. So like I've never done a mortgage where they fit that criteria.
I've talked to people where they would fit that criteria, but then when I explain like these are all the costs involved, they're like, "Oh, okay, maybe I won't do it." They don't want
Correct.
to pay the tax. So, but if people are purchasing things, I mean, what we want to do is eliminate Canada's housing economy as a way for people to launder money through it. So if we're
Correct.
cutting down on, we're making our compliance tougher, we're making the fraud prevention tougher, then that's going to be a way for less people to be able to launder money through the Canadian system because there are just so many different hoops to jump through, which should then lower or decelerate the cost of purchasing homes and make it
Yeah,
more affordable for
less
Canadians.
trading of real estate as like a secured asset, like a stock. Um, that's it's
Yeah.
just not. We don't have enough housing to mess around with that. We need to get houses in ownership, by people that live here, essentially.
Yeah.
Um,
So if there's foreign students that are not coming in, if we've cut back our foreign students coming into the country, that's another way to
Cut back on
if
immigration. I think we made so many moves in such a short time. I'm hoping that we no more moves. We need to see how this plan is going to plan out.
well, I think a new prime minister is going to come in and make moves though. Like what is like we're going to have two new prime ministers potentially. The first one looks like it's going to be Mark Carney, maybe Chrystia Freeland, but sounds like it's going to be
They
Mark
may
Carney.
put Chrystia Freeland up there to walk the plank. I think that the Liberal Party is doesn't have a chance at the next election. So why not? She was at the helm of a lot of these
Yeah.
financial decisions, whether she quit or not in the last minute. They may put her up there to walk the plank. See you later.
I disagree. I think that I think we'll have Carney come in. I think he's the only one that gives them a fighting chance of maybe the whole party imploding. I just think Chrystia Freeland is too tied to Justin Trudeau for her to have a chance at it. And as you said, she'll walk the plank. Like,
That's
is
why
that
they
what the
may.
Liberal Party wants?
I don't know. Um,
Anyway,
but if she is the nominee, then I think that's the agenda.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's have this guy, let's have her go and
Yep.
then put
See you
in Mark
later.
Carney
Now
later.
we can totally wash our hands of that. We can wash off the stink of the current prime minister and move on as a party. But I don't
Yeah.
know what they're gonna do. I hope for the best. I hope they get their act together so we don't see
Yeah.
this again. We've had some tremendous liberal prime ministers in the past. Maybe and hopefully we will in the future.
Yeah. Well, I'm done for today. You got anything else you want to jump
No,
in
there's
here?
some other stuff like rents. We can talk about that, but let's put that off for another time. That the rents are down and the impact that may have. But I'm out of gas here too. I mean, I said
Yeah.
rectal scan instead of retinal scan. I think I need to go back to bed.
Let's maybe. Did you get that from the Robin Hood movie you were
Uh,
watching?
Probably. I mean, we did so many. We executed a lot of great quotes today from other movies, and I think I picked that one up from a Jim Carrey movie as well. So is what it is. We don't
It
edit
is.
this, so we'll see.
Here we go. All right. See you next week, Vaughn. Have a good one.